These microphones are amazing.
This is how they always work. You just can't hear yourself.
I just never...
Yeah, that's how the editing goes. Welcome back, Shat listeners, to Shat on TV American Gods, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the Starz series American Gods. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host and best friend, the King Bee.
Dear God.
This is our Season 3 preview episode where we dive deep into the cast, production, and background of American Gods to calibrate our expectations from this series we've been covering for more than 3 years. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast to make sure you don't miss an episode. You can do that wherever you get your podcasts or by visiting shatontv.com/subscribe. Once again, our pledge to you is 4 things. 1, we're going to keep this podcast tight as always. We won't go over the show scene by scene. We'll tie together the big ideas and bring you insights worth talking about and improve your viewing experience. Also, we will hear you. Audience participation is a huge part of Shat on TV, and conversations are always humming on Twitter, YouTube, email, and our Discord. 5,000 minds are better than one, and you, the listeners, make us better as hosts. Our third pledge to you is we will not spoil the show. So if you don't like spoilers, this is the place to be. Each podcast episode will only talk about what we've seen, not what we might know is coming. I have read the book, as have some listeners, but that's only to prepare, not to predict. So we might reference the book from time to time, but we're not going to tell you what happens next. And finally, we're going to spend more time adding context to what you saw on screen, whether that's a god, a part of America, or a cultural reference, rather than passing judgment on the show itself. We don't want to yuck you or yum, but if something is deliciously bad, we're still going to have fun with it. We can't take this show too seriously. It is, after all, American Gods.
Dear God.
Just to get a couple things out of the way of how we're going to do things, the King Bee and I, American Gods is going to air every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern starting January 10th on Starz. And we're going to do things a little bit differently this season than we have in the past. You're still going to get the 1 episode a week, but that's going to come on Wednesdays, as in Mr. Wednesday. So we have a little more time to rewatch, digest the episode, edit, and hear from the audience. And we also have a new way to hear from the audience. You can still email us at host@shatontv.com or call us at 914-719-SHAT. We love those voicemails. But now you also can join us on Sunday immediately after American Gods for a live discussion on Twitch. It might be both of us. It might just be me. It might be just the King Bee. But one of us will be here to hang out with you, get your opinions. It's totally free, and you get to see our beautiful faces. There on Twitch, you can share your thoughts and hear what we thought, and then your insights will influence our deep dive that we do once a week. As for your email and voicemail, we still post letters to shatontv.com under the American Gods section, and we're going to respond to those on the website. We'll also read select letters during the deep dive. So if you don't want your letter read, that's totally cool. Just let us know in your email. Just note, hey, don't read this on the pod. It's a super secret for you guys.
But I'll hold your secrets.
Now, as for this season of American Gods, what makes it different? Well, lots of things. We're looking at 10 episodes this season, making this the longest season of American Gods with weekly releases every Sunday, as I mentioned, at 8 Eastern. The full episode list has been released, unlike in past years. It's something that we saw with Lovecraft Country as well. And I noticed, some hints in there, and I don't want to get into too many of them because I don't want to spoil anything. But one key thing to notice is that the penultimate episode of this season is titled The Lake Effect. And one of the settings of American Gods is in Lakeside, Wisconsin, which is where we know Shadow is going. So I'm led to believe that we might spend this entire season in one place, and that's the kind of TV I like.
Now, Gene, Neil Gaiman has said that he had planned this out for 5 seasons. This is a lengthier season than our previous outings. Do you feel these extra 2 episodes are really needed to cover the material that you think we're going to see? Or are they really just padding this with filler?
Man, I don't know, because they're throwing in a lot of new characters into a show that already had plenty of faces. And so I started doing the math on it, and I was like, okay, Lovecraft Country, which we just finished doing, that added a bunch of stuff to the original novel, and they still got it done in one season, and that was a 400-page novel. Game of Thrones, for comparison, they got through book 1 pretty much in the first season, and that's a 700-page novel. American Gods is 740 pages, which is a lot. I mean, it's a big book, But compared to, again, Game of Thrones, we are now on our third season and just 300 pages in. We're not even halfway done. So yeah, it does feel like, Neil Gaiman is, I don't know if he's just milking this or he's just really enjoying the attention.
I will say that we're all aware that this production has been plagued with a lot of issues. There's been showrunner changes, casting changes, character updates, and character changes throughout. I've got to wonder, with that much going on behind the scenes, how much is it affecting the story they're really trying to tell? And beyond padding it out, like, are they really just trying to make up for stumbles?
I mean, that's a great question. And I think that question is coming up a lot in like critics' reviews and even audience reception. I mean, I've gone into threads where on Reddit and elsewhere where people are fans of the show and they're going, well, this guy's gone, she's gone, this other person's gone, the showrunners have changed twice. What is there to bring us back? And all I can say is, one of the reasons we decided to do American Gods is I've been in love with the novel since I was a teenager. It still resonates with me, and there are glimmers of it there. But I think you and I, at least in season 2, I mean, we're taking this more of just a kind of a catalog of mythology than some sort of a coherent storyline.
Ultimately, it speaks to me that you've got to give credit to the Starz Network for keeping the show going. Just before we started recording, Gene and I had a brief conversation about amazing shows that aren't getting second or third seasons, and this thing just keeps chugging along. Nothing seems to be able to stop it.
Again, you would think that the kind of delays that they had with COVID, the kind of delays they had with production, again, showrunners changing twice now, that those would be stumbling blocks where they'd say, let's pull the cord on this thing. But at the same time, it seems like Starz sees something in this show that's worth investing in. And, a lot of the cast is still left intact, right? I mean, although lots has changed, we still have Shadow Moon, we still have Laura Moon, Mr. Wednesday, Technical Boy, Salim, Chernobog, Bilquis, Mr. Ibis, Sam Blackcrow. These are all characters that we've seen before. They're coming back for season 3. So it's not a complete revolution. But yeah, if you compare it to shows like, say, The Walking Dead or other shows that were very lengthy in their tenure, even though they lost some characters and gained some characters, for the most part, the cast was fairly intact, unless they got eaten. But there is reason to be excited about this season. I think one good reason to get excited is that we have a new showrunner who seems to be a TV traditionalist in Chic Eglee. So this is a guy whose career stretches back to moonlighting in the 80s. And The King B and I remember that. Most of you probably don't. It was a Bruce Willis, romantic cop show? What the hell was it? Detective show?
Back when, Bruce Willis was a young, promising television star. He had this show, Moonlighting. It was probably one of the top shows in the country. Bruce Willis is a private detective. Sybil Shepherd is his kind of quirky, sassy secretary. They had a big will they, won't they for a long time, and they solved crimes.
So what we're saying is that's the kind of stories this showrunner is ready to give us. But also, I mean, he worked on The Shield, he worked on NYPD Blue and Dexter and season 1 of The Walking Dead. Now, you've heard us shit on The Walking Dead before on this podcast, but season 1 I really, really enjoyed. I mean, I think it's actually some pretty good TV, and he was involved with that as well.
In their time, each of those shows was definitely top-tier stuff. It was premium TV that everyone was talking about. If you go back today and watch them, they didn't really have the longest shelf life. Yeah, there's some great stuff, but with the direction TV has gone as far as like quality storytelling and things like that, they just don't hold up.
At the same time, though, what I look for in a show that we haven't really seen recently in a lot of TV that we've watched, like Lovecraft Country, is sort of a continuity, an easier to follow show. And you and I talked about it before, that maybe the reason we don't connect with a lot of TV out there right now is that these are younger showrunners and we may not understand their style or the culture of TV currently. And so, maybe this is an attempt they look at the audience, they go, listen, American Gods has kind of an audience that's a Neil Gaiman audience. It might be a little bit older. Maybe we get somebody in there who's a little more traditional in the storytelling. And with Neil Gaiman no longer tied up with Good Omens, it kind of gives him an ability to come back and get the show back on track. At least if you listen to Ricky Whittle, that's what's going on.
I don't know that a TV traditionalist is really the best move. I point to shows like Legion on FX and Daylight on Netflix, which are these really huge, creative new concepts that I think took big risks in the realms of like visual storytelling. And I'm not going to say that either one of those shows was 100% a home run, but they took creative risks for these again, giant concepts, and tried something new. You know, to quote old Ehrmantraut from Breaking Bad, the time for half measures is over.
I want to talk a little bit about season 2, just where we are right now. Again, it's been so long since we saw this show that I was left kind of scratching my head. I'm like, okay, why is Shadow in hiding? Oh yeah, the new gods are after him. I decided to sketch out just a quick timeline based on the show, not the novel, of what we saw at the end of season 2 to kind of get us all back on track. So last season ended with Mr. Wednesday surviving a showdown with Mad Sweeney. Mad Sweeney tried to kill him. He failed. Technical Boy got a digital upgrade, if you remember, from New Media. So now he can label Shadow, Salim, and Wednesday terrorists. Shadow was trying to escape from the house that was getting raided. And somehow a flashback of his childhood, of him sweeping cops off of a playmat, caused the cops to disappear. And then Laura kind of did that Incredible Hulk walk away into the sunset with Sweeney's body. Remember, they're a couple now. They banged. And then, of course, the season ended with Shadow magically changing his identity and leaving on the bus toward Lakeside, Wisconsin. And that's kind of where we left off.
Calling all new gods, be on the lookout for a 6'5" African-American male. Always looks like he's smelling a fart, wearing a dead animal on top of his head. Yes, that's his disguise. Is he really in hiding, or is he just trying to get out of town?
Well, when he changed his identity to Mike Ainsel, I thought that like the ID would show like a 5'6" white dude, like kind of heavy set in his 40s, and go, oh, he's going to mix right in. Like, no. The picture is exactly like him. So, yes, he looks the way he looks on TV, and he's going to stand out. But, if he grows out a beard and a little bit of hair.
That hair. Good God, that hair. That's a stylistic mistake right there. They should have given him a big hat or something. That hair is not working for me. Real quick, I just want to touch on this. I understand that in the world we're seeing in this show, people are influenced by the media and the things that they're seeing. But I'm going to ask you, Gene. It comes across on a reliable television news channel, if such a thing exists. And they show a picture of a Middle Eastern man, an old white dude, and a light-skinned black man together. And they say these three men are part of a terrorist plot. You going to buy into that?
I mean, I've lived through 2020, so yeah. Like, it doesn't seem that weird. I mean, the whole Nashville bombing, I'm still scratching my head going, what the fuck?
Yeah, that's a weird one.
It is a weird one. Well, we mentioned earlier that lots of cast members are returning. There are a few who aren't. And I think the big one that everyone knows about, but in case you don't know the details, is Orlando Jones. Now, Orlando Jones, the King B and I both said, did some pretty good work in earlier seasons. And he wasn't just on screen. This guy was a writer and a consulting producer on season 2, but he was fired from the show as the new showrunner, Chic Eglee, took the helm. Now, according to Orlando Jones, who posted a video about it, he was like, listen, don't let these motherfuckers tell you they love Mr. Nancy. They don't. This new showrunner is Connecticut-born and Yale-educated, so he's very smart, and he thinks that Mr. Nancy's angry get shit done is the wrong message for Black America. Orlando Jones also said that working on American Gods was a nightmare and that he was treated as a second-class citizen for just doing his job too well. Now, Fremantle, the production company, they said that he was cut because he doesn't belong in this part of the story.
So, Gene, real quick, having been a book reader, as I am not, do you feel that there's some veracity to that claim?
Here's why I think that just doesn't stick. Mr. Nancy does show up in this part of the book. So that's the part I don't get. And also, if you have Orlando Jones, who essentially was the de facto writer for any disenfranchised character, right? So if you were a character of color, ostracized in any way, he was really helping write those characters. And so just throwing him out of the picture, I really do think this is probably just creative differences between the new showrunners and Orlando Jones, who is, by no means a very passive personality. But taking a guy like that who's done so much for the show and just kind of casting him aside feels really nasty, especially when I believe he was doing like publicity tours for the show when he found out that he was fired.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird one. The guy behind our favorite 7-Up commercials, in my opinion, turned in what I feel is the most effective and relevant scene in this entire show's history with his first appearance. I could easily understand the guy's frustration. If you Google image search that Chic Eglee guy, he definitely looks like someone who would question what is the right voice for African Americans in this time.
Also, his response to Orlando Jones's statement about him being, the new showrunner being from Connecticut and Yale educated, he just responded, "I wasn't born in Connecticut."
Jesus Christ. Dear God.
Well, another character that was a fan favorite and a hunk of Middle Eastern funk was the Jinn. So played by Musa Kreish, he also wasn't asked to return for season 3. So Salim's romantic subplot seems to be over for now. What's interesting about that is that he was also kind of involved in Salim's escape. Got to be an explanation as to what happened to him, and I'm really looking forward to that. But this was a groundbreaking character, King B. I mean, he was both Middle Eastern and queer. It's easy to think that this showrunner, 68 years old, straight, is trying to make the show more mainstream.
No more dudes coming fire and driving motorcycles with sidecars around.
I mean, not on the show.
No.
Definitely here.
Jesus.
But on the other hand... But on the other hand, the Jinn has already played more of a role in the series than he did in the novel. So I think it's important to note that, let's practice a little bit of wait and see here, because it could just be that they're doing some housekeeping where they're like, listen, these are characters that we don't want to work with. It's like a coach inheriting a team and they want a new roster, right?
Depending on how much Neil Gaiman has to do with the production, looking at past scenes, it's obvious that there are certain scenes or character interactions or pieces of dialogue that are really there to just sort of express a musing by the writer of the show, not necessarily to move the story forward. This may be just evidence of that they explored the concept that they wanted to with this character, and they're off to new things, and they'll just introduce new characters for any new ideas they have.
Now, one character that I was looking forward to seeing in this season, and I was so smug and being like, all right, well, at least, Crispin Glover's back as Mr. World. You just told me that's not the case.
Part of this production for this podcast is that we both do a little bit of research and take notes. And Gene had submitted an outline for what he wanted the show to be, and I took a look at his outline and I gave my input on all the bullet points that we were going to talk about. And 2 minutes later, he shot back screaming at me that I didn't put enough in. So I started Googling, different cast changes and updates and new characters, and immediately spoiled the show for myself, totally ruined it. I know how it's going to end. Don't do that to yourself. Just listen to us and we'll walk you along the way. According to my reading, we're going to get a couple new characters introduced that are going to take the place of Crispin Glover. He will return for the initial episode, but he's not seen again for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think they have him listed as like a guest star now.
He's notoriously difficult to work with. I'm quite certain that that's been the case, and I think this is just another creative casting to get difficult cast members out of the way.
One guy that's considered a gem by most people who work with him is Pablo Schreiber, and he was a fan favorite as well, especially after season 2. Matt Sweeney's story really got quite juicy, quite endearing. And, I was not a big fan in the beginning. I just felt like he'd been on the show for too long, much longer than he was in the book, and that he was kind of thrown into this heroic arc where, I typically liked him as kind of sort of a tragic figure. But they kind of changed all that. He got speared through the heart by Shadow in season 2. So it's pretty safe to say Pablo Schreiber won't be in the picture. And I know he'd kind of grown on you, King B, but at least we get some new cast members to make up for it.
In their absence, I went and saw that heist movie that Pablo Schreiber is in with Ice Cube's kid.
Never heard of it.
You know what? I think it's called Heist, and if it's not, I'm not going to look it up. Terrible movie.
So farewell to Pablo Schreiber, farewell to Musa Kreish, farewell to Orlando Jones, and apparently farewell to Crispin Glover, along with Kyun Kim, who played New Media. All of them are gone, but we do get some new cast members in here. And you mentioned King B. Mr. World will be played by several different faces in this season, different iterations of him. And the big one that a lot of people are talking about is Danny Trejo. And as soon as I saw this, I was like, man, they had better not fuck this up. Because although Trejo is a bit past his prime, I think in recent commercials and shows, he kind of just plays this caricature of himself. He's still a pretty cool dude, in real life. And yeah, he might have not done anything impressive since Dusk Till Dawn or Machete, but having him play Mr. World could be fun if he sort of incorporates some aspects of Crispin Glover's mystique into that character. I would love to see a Danny Trejo playing a Crispin Glover. I think that would be interesting.
I did a little bit of research about the form of Mr. World that Danny Trejo takes, and I'm not going to talk about it today because I think it does introduce some sort of spoilers to the rest of the season. My issue with it, as much as I love Danny Trejo, that guy could be your neighbor. He has this blue collar, very everyman sort of sensibility and cadence and diction that is incredibly relatable and very, very, very human. Mr. World isn't those things. You know, Crispin Glover is bizarre and calculating and unsettling and unnatural. And I think that those are aspects that Danny Trejo isn't going to be able to bring to the table. And I'm going to stop it there because ultimately I don't want to give too much away, but I am glad to see somebody relatable on this show for a change.
Now, someone who's a little bit beyond the mundane is Dominique Jackson, who's playing another form of, who's playing a Miss World. And I believe that Dominique Jackson is the first transgender actress on American Gods. Her previous big role was on FX's Pose, which is about the ballroom scene in New York. And this could be either really interesting or really awful. And what I have seen from at least the trailers is that it doesn't seem that they're really playing up that transgender part of the role, but rather just letting Dominique Jackson play a hyper-violent, very powerful woman.
You know what? I want you to keep up that optimism. It's going to be important for us to maintain the next 10 weeks. Without spoilers, let me ask you this. Knowing the plot of the book, do you feel there's a need for these character changes for individual roles? Or do you think that this is back to those behind-the-scenes troubles?
No, I do think that they're trying to cover for Crispin Glover not being on the show. If Crispin Glover said, I want to be Mr. World for season 3, I think they would have been like, fine. Let's do it, because there's no like evidence that this is necessary from the novel, and I just hope that they capitalize on it, thematically. Another big name that's coming up in season 3 is Marilyn Manson. Now, Ash is on the record as being a big fan of Marilyn Manson. I thought he was a pretty decent rock star prior to Evan Rachel Wood speaking out against the abuse she suffered in their relationship. I mean, Manson's no stranger to TV. Like, he was in Sons of Anarchy, Eastbound and Down, Californication. He even played a small role in The New Pope and Salem. And again, showrunner Chic Eglee just being the hip dude that he is. He says, as a longtime admirer of his estimable talent as an author, artist, musician, and actor, it is dope indeed to be working with Mr. Manson in season 3 of American Gods.
Jesus Christ.
Now, Manson will be playing a character that's sort of close to his own biography, a Viking death metal singer known as Johan Wengren. So really, King B, I mean, you got Vikings, you got death metal, you got Marilyn Manson. It's all your favorite things just rolled into one.
Normally, I'd say that this is evidence that big Hollywood is really afraid of me and they don't want me talking about this show because this little bio is practically daring me not to watch. That being said, the dude's stint in Eastbound and Down was literally a 20-second cameo that I had zero recollection of, and I've watched that show 10 times through. Somehow, I don't think he's going to have much impact on this season. He's a novelty get a couple years past any kind of relevancy, in my opinion.
Yeah, before we get too hyped up on this, I do think that it could be as simple as in one episode, he's a rock star on stage for like 2 minutes, and that's it.
He may have as many lines of dialogue as Lou Reed's jacket in season 2.
I do like Lou Reed's jacket, though. Another singer who is appearing in season 3 is Horizon Guardiola. She was in The Get Down on Netflix. She's playing Oshun, who is a goddess of love, purity, fertility, who championed the enslaved people who built America. Now, this is what I was talking about is I wonder if she's supposed to be like a kinder, gentler stand-in for Mr. Nancy, right?
If these allegations of wanting to quiet the angry black voices of the show and subjugate them with a more kinder or gentler sort of vibe are like actually the case, that's a really bad look.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she doesn't exist in the novel. Maybe they're just trying to increase the sex appeal of the show. I don't know. But, in fact, we actually get a third fertility goddess, which is Blythe Danner playing Demeter, who's the Greek goddess of the harvest. And so she kind of also plays into that sort of realm. So I don't know what's going on here, but there's going to be a lot of fertility in season 3.
A lot of fixation on getting knocked up in the old gods.
Now, one character that'll have a lot of screen presence and who I had never heard of, and so I'm excited to see, is Ashley Reyes. So she's a stage actress who will be playing Cordelia, totally new character, just out of the ether. She is described as a college dropout with a ton of debt, and Wednesday wants to road trip with her. So now it looks like we got a parallel to Shadow Moon. I don't know if the show's just trying to show us like parallels in characters or circles within circles, but it's getting a bit crowded on stage.
Listen, if you want to be in one episode of TV and that is all, talk to Neil Gaiman about helping Shadow Moon get from one town to the next.
And speaking of road trips, King B, we see a scene with Laura Moon and what looks like another leprechaun, played by the actor Ewan Rayon, who everyone will recognize as Ramsay Bolton from Game of Thrones. Now, little bait and switch where we lose one fake Irishman, we gain another one. Now the leprechaun, Matt Sweeney, is gone, and we get Liam Doyle, the leprechaun. I still can't see this guy as anything other than a sadistic bastard, but I'm told that he played something slightly different in Marvel's Inhumans. Did you catch that one?
He plays the exact same sort of watered-down evil loyalty character. It's a shtick. That Inhuman show is literally a 0 for 10. I'd rather watch a DC Extended Universe movie than now watch that show again. How is it that that guy has a more Game of Thrones real name than his actual character name in the show? I don't get it. Listen, I'm glad the guy's getting work. He's, again, another character I've learned doesn't appear in the novel, but this show apparently tells me we need another leprechaun. At the risk of sounding ungrateful, Gene, if they're going to break from the novel this much, why are they killing off one leprechaun just to add another? Wouldn't it be easier just not to kill the first one and gum the story up some more?
Especially if you're looking at this the way I'm looking at it and thinking this leprechaun serves a very specific purpose, which might be to retrieve a very specific thing that another leprechaun got rid of. It seems to be telegraphing a lot, but we'll have to wait and see. I do know that I really enjoyed him in Game of Thrones, and hopefully he'll bring some of that dark charm to American Gods. And speaking of the DC Extended Universe, I did want to talk about the actor who's going to be playing Chad Mulligan, who is the chief of police in Lakeside, where we'll be spending most of our time this season. Now, we just did Fargo for Shat the Movies, and I was reminded of how much I love Marge Gunderson, the police chief in Fargo. So I was excited to see a screen version of Chad Mulligan, who's a very, very similar character, sort of this folksy, kind police chief that just kind of, mitigates small disputes in his small town and is, just kind of warm to everybody. It's interesting that they went with Eric Johnson, who was in The Flash and 50 Shades Darker, because when you think about Chad Mulligan, this character, in my head, he's kind of got a little bit of a belly. He's like an older guy. He's like that old, friendly Midwestern cop.
Maybe this is like that show Banshee, where everyone is intensely good looking for no reason whatsoever.
That is seriously a spank bank of a show.
Every episode.
Every
episode.
Like that and True Detective Season 1.
Oh, jeez.
Talk about shows where you're just like, you know what? I don't want to watch porn right now. I'm actually just going to go watch those scenes from Banshee.
Jesus Christ.
And the same chick. She's in both shows.
God bless her. God, you know what? We need to say her name.
Lily Simmons.
God bless her. Lily Simmons. You know what? She's wonderful. I got nothing bad to say about Lily Simmons for the rest of time.
All right. So now that we have already cut our small audience in half, we'll move on to another character that we find in Lakeside, and probably my favorite casting of the season. So we get Julia Sweeney. Now, that's a name you might not know, but you'll know her when you see her on the show. She was on SNL for a while, famously as Pat. You might know her voice from NPR's Wait, Wait, but I will always remember her as the wolf's date from the scrapyard in Pulp Fiction.
Those high-waisted jeans.
Yeah, and that lumberjack shirt. Just because you are a character doesn't mean you have character. So she's playing Hinzelman, who is a dude in the book. And I don't want to spoil anything, but this storyline is so good that I can see why they'd want to spend a whole season at Lakeside. Hinzelman is probably the most fascinating character in American Gods. And all this does is make me wish the Coen brothers had made this show, because this season, this setting, and the things that happen in this town deserve the Coen brothers treatment.
Now, years ago, Julia Sweeney told an amazing story on an episode of This American Life. She was working as a cocktail waitress in a hotel bar, and every waitress made a living skimming cash from this bar. And she talks about how it becomes this compulsion for her that led her to abandoning her family for the holidays because she knew how much skim was at stake at this job. It's always stuck with me. It's an amazing episode. It's People Who Turn to a Life of Crime. You should look it up. As for her role in the show, the American Gods Wiki said that she's a world-famous fishing lure artisan, which makes, to me, the gender swap suddenly feel really weird because I have never in my life seen a woman making fishing flies or fishing lures. I know they exist. I believe they do. But you've never seen one represented. I'm glad to see them breaking out with old Sweeney.
Do you spend a lot of time around fishing lure artisans?
I look back in my mind and think about every television or book character or any depiction of a person that makes flies. It's always like an old white dude with glasses, and he's got a little rig on a dimly lit desk, and he's got little tools and thread, and that's just how fishing lure or fly fishing people are depicted. It's always a dude.
I'm just waiting for this scene where Shadow Moon is sitting alongside Hinzelman, and together she's teaching him to make the fishing lures, and that's going to be just a whole music montage.
Brilliant. I can't wait. Glad to see some new representation in the field of fishing fly fictional characters.
Get on it, Chic. Chic Eglee, I mean. All right, guys, that'll do it for this preview episode of Shat on TV American Gods. Now we begin the countdown to January 10th, when Starz rolls the dice on its third season. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. On Facebook, just search for Shat on TV Podcast. The website is shatontv.com. You can email me and the King Bee at hosts@shatontv.com or call us and leave a voicemail at 914-719-SHAT. Also, join us live after each episode on Sundays at shatontv.com/Twitch. If you've never used Twitch, it's super, super easy. Just go to that address, hang out with us live, and you can chat with us. We'll be on screen, and we just want to hear what you thought of each episode. You can also check out our sister podcast, Shat the Movies, where we cover 80s and 90s movies commissioned by you, the listeners. You can find past and future episodes at shatthemovies.com. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please leave a 5-star review. That helps our podcast grow. This is one of our smaller podcasts. And we do appreciate a lot of you coming back. If you're listening to this on one of our other podcast channels, thanks for listening this far. We hope that maybe you'll get interested in American Gods and join us for season 3. On behalf of my co-hosts, the King Bee, Ash Lafley, and Big D Dick Ebert, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for American Gods season 3, episode 1, A Winter's Tale. Until then, thanks for listening and stay the fuck at home.